Last General Conference, President Nelson made history as the first general authority to say anything about anti-black racism from the pulpit. He further instructed the saints to lead out in abandoning attitudes and actions of prejudice, a sentiment recently added to our own church handbooks. However, this begged the question, what are these attitudes and actions of prejudice? Most members would agree that racism is bad, but many struggle to understand what it looks like outside of burning crosses and hurling racial epithets. For example, a few weeks after President Nelson's remarks, President Oaks gave his own history-making talk, where he became the first general authority to say Black Lives Matter, and not just that, but affirm it as an eternal truth. Many of these same members who claimed not to be okay with racism were not okay with that. So today, I want to talk about just one particular attitude and action of prejudice that too many of the saints engage. Much like the teachings of Korihor, it's a seductive heresy because it contains a small kernel of truth. This heresy is all lives matter. Off the rip, I have to acknowledge that it's an innocuous enough statement, out of context, and perhaps even inspiring to some people. But in context, the phrase was conceived and deployed in an effort to deflect, derail, or otherwise minimize conversations asserting the humanity of Black people in the face of the pattern of Black death. At a time where we should all be fulfilling our covenant obligation to mourn with those that mourn and comfort those that stand in need of comfort, All Lives Matter does the opposite of that, thereby making the lives of Black folks harder, as well as making it harder for us to keep our covenants. But rather than rehash what has already been explained 11 times, utilizing cutesy analogies about broken bones and burning houses and whatnot, I'd like to take a different tack and simply talk about what Jesus would do. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. Wouldn't Jesus say all lives matter? Doesn't he love all of us after all? Didn't he die for all of us? These are almost fair questions, but we have to mind the context of the atonement. Yeah, Jesus died for all of us because all of us were held captive by sin and death. So how does Jesus respond when not everyone needs help? Fortunately for us, there's a whole chapter of Jesus giving 3 parables about this very thing. In Luke chapter 15, we get the parable of the lost sheep, where the shepherd leaves the 99 to find the one. We get the parable of the lost coin, and then we get the parable of the prodigal son, where the father clearly loves both of his sons, but rejoices and throws a party when the prodigal son, the one who was lost, returns. There's actually a party at the end of all of these parables when the one that was lost is found. 10 chapters earlier, this same Jesus taught that the whole need no physician, but they that are sick. This can also be read, the liberated need no liberator, but them that are captive, or all lives don't need to be told that they matter, but those that are routinely told that they don't. It's not a coincidence that in the next chapter, we get the Beatitudes, where Jesus pronounces blessings on these individuals. Blessed are the poor, blessed are the hungry, blessed are they who weep, and blessed are those who are hated for my sake. If Jesus simply said, blessed are all lives, rather than recite the Beatitudes, would we get the point? As long as we've been teaching our primary children to sing, as I've loved you, love one another, has this translated in any way to a practice of active anti-racism? Can you imagine yourself interrupting Jesus' Sermon on the Mount to say, blessed are all lives, Jesus? As he's telling us specifically who needs our help, who we need to affirm, who is indeed blessed, and who matters to God and who should therefore matter to us. We'd like to believe that we wouldn't be that kind of rude to a Jesus that we haven't seen. But why would we do it to Black people right in front of us? I want to add my witness to President Oaks that Black Lives Matter is indeed an eternal truth, but I'll add it's also a modern day beatitude that Jesus himself would declare. Jesus' ministry is replete with evidence. When he said, suffer the children to come unto me, he said, children's lives matter. When he taught the Samaritan woman at the well and gave the parable of the Good Samaritan, he was saying Samaritan lives matter. When Jesus healed the Syrophoenician woman's daughter or rebuked Peter for his ethnic racism against Gentiles, he was saying Gentile lives matter. When Jesus kicked off his mortal ministry by breaking religious law and cleansing a leper, thereby granting them not only access to a healthy body, but also access to society and worship experiences, Jesus said, "Leper lives matter." This same Jesus throughout the history of the prophets commanded us to care for the poor, the orphan, the widow, the immigrant. This same Jesus is a brown-skinned man who was lynched by the state for challenging a corrupt political system. This same Jesus sees me and those who look like me. This is the Jesus who we worship, and this same Jesus declares emphatically that Black lives matter. And as his disciples, we must go and do likewise, lest our message of the restored gospel of him who ministered to the last, the lost, the left out, and the least of these become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal.